Immediately after the video, I will start my presentation. Immediately when the video is over.
Yeah, when the video is over, you can start your presentation by 10 o'clock, sir.
So we need to wait for 3 minutes then.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Because we are starting sharply at 10 o'clock, sir. That's why I am saying that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You can play the video now, sir. On full screen.
Hindusthan College of Engineering and Technology, Department of Science and Humanities proudly presents a national level webinar on text, textuality and discourse in literature. Here we have Amithabh Vikram Dwidevi is the University Faculty of Linguistics and Languages, heading the School of Literature at Sri Mata Vaishno Devi University, Jammu Kashmir. His research interests in language documentation writing, descriptive grammar, and preservation of rare and endangered languages in South Asia. Poems are a great way of saying welcome to the family. It gives me a great pride to stand by your side to welcome you for this session that make the session blessed for drawing you an edge. You become the support of the staggering. We get inspiration from you today. In life, I wish to be like you. Thank you for coming here for this webinar session. This gathering here is delighted. This place is filled with brightness, defeat to go victory. Got cold air in his hot weather. You came like sir, like trouble got some medicine. Sir, upon your arrival to the session, everyone mild here, I welcome you to make this occasion a memory and moment and many remember. On behalf of the management and on behalf of the HOD, I heartfully welcome Amithabh Vikram Dwivedi from Jammu and Kashmir for this today's session.
Cross it, close the window.
Yeah, you can close the window and open the PPT. Yeah. Okay. That's it. Okay, Charles, you can start the presentation at 10 o'clock, sir. Okay. I will be with you till 10 o'clock, then I will cut the phone, sir.
Yeah, then I will cut the phone. Yes.
Yeah. Then after the section, I will call you.
Fine.
Okay. Last 5 minutes will be the questionnaire section.
Yes.
You can see the live chat there.
Okay.
And answer there. Just say our audience to write questions on the command box, then you will tell the answers.
Okay, I will say that they can post their question in the command box.
Okay, sir. Okay. I think you can start now, Princess.
You can start?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Okay, I am cutting the phone then. Fine.
Yeah, sure, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good morning, all of you. First of all, I would like to thank Hindusthan College of Engineering and Technology for inviting me for this lecture on text, textuality, and discourse. As I've come to know that many of you are from engineering background, and you are not aware of the field of literature and how literary text is created. So I have made this entire presentation very simple, easy to understand, and these are important concepts that are beneficial for you if you try your hand in creative writing. So as you know that the topic and the title of my presentation is Textuality and Discourse in Literature. First, we will discuss what is text and what is textuality. We call something that is printed and in the form of a book as a textbook. So we have textbook of different subjects, different disciplines. So the working definition for a text is something that is written or printed in terms of content rather than physical form. Here, this content word is important because when we talk about content, we are actually talking about the quality. We are not talking about the quantity, the shape. So that's why content is important to ascertain what is a text and what is not. And that's why we give more preference to content rather than to the physical form of a text. This is one definition. This is one dictionary definition that you find in uh, at various places in various books you find. But at the same time, we need to understand that from where this word has been derived. Now, this word text has been derived from Latin textus. Now, what is the meaning of this textus? Now, textus is basically a tissue or literally style. So it has two meaning in Latin in Latin vocabulary. One is like something that is a tissue and something that is a literary style. And text is also a verb when you have texture. And what is the verb in Latin? Woven. Woven is the verb. So woven verb is again related to a fabric. We have some fabric and the fabric is a woven. So these two concepts, literary style and woven, both are very important when we try to understand the concept of text. When we have a fabric like a cloth, we use thread to weave. But when we have a text in the form of a book, we use words to weave it. So we will see how words are important to actually weave this textual fabric. We will see this in future slides. But another concept that is textuality is closely associated with text. And when you talk about this textuality, this suffix ity is important. In engineering, you study electricity. Again, ity. So ity is basically quality. This suffix means quality. Quality of being electric. That is electricity. So similarly, quality of being something textual, that is basically textuality. So you can see how text and textuality are related. So text is something that you can see, text is something that you can perceive, but textuality is an abstract notion. So this is basically the difference between text and textuality. And when you talk about where this entire text is situated, entire text is situated in a context. So if you are attending, let's say a physics class, and you are reading mathematics books, then it is out of context. Similarly, if someone greets you good morning, and the other person says, uh, "Today is my exam," so like the answer of good morning is not "Today is my exam," but the answer of good morning is "Good morning." So this is like a text occurs in the context, and if it is out of context, then it becomes meaningless. This is basically uh, we can find what is a text and what is not the text. So basically, what comes before and after the text, it becomes a context of that particular text, and context is responsible for determining the meaning of the text. The same thing you can use in different contexts, that if someone is late in the class and the teacher says why are you so early today? So again, like the literal words, they are not important, but the context, like you know that you are late, you are not early. Your teacher also knows that you are not on time and you are late. So that's why, like, this context, but the meaning is different. So the literal meaning is not the meaning, but the context that determines the meaning of a text. Now, before we move further, we need to understand these three field of studies. Now we have literature, we have language, and we have a linguistics. We know very well that language is primary and literature secondary. When I say language is primary, that means we know language, and language is responsible for the creation of literature. If we do not have any language, then we do not have any literature. So language is primary and literature secondary. And this language gives literature a textual form. A textual form, as I said, like words are responsible to weave the literature like a fabric. So we have words, we 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 pick a novel, any novel, then we have words all around. And those words, they occur in some context, and that particular context uh, gives you an insight to create an imaginary world, that is the fictional world that we have, and there are various characters, settings, different contexts, dialogues, and things. Various things happen in the text. That is a textual word that you have. So literature is basically a textual form, and literature is also an object of study. Someone wants to study literature, then you have like BA honors in English, then masters in English, or like further people, they go for a doctorate in any particular topic. So literature is basically a secondary thing when we compare it to language, but it is also an object of study. That means, like, you can study literature for entertainment sake, and at the same time you can study literature as a serious discipline. Now language, medium of text and object of study. Now language itself is also a medium of text. That means, like, language is responsible to create literature, but at the same time we can also study language. And how can we study language? Through linguistics. Now, so linguistics basically becomes the meta language for language. So language about language is basically known as meta language. So you can see how these three things are important. Now it's not possible that you are reading literature on your own, and uh, and you are ignoring the language. It's not possible. So you are very much aware of the language, and that's why the text becomes meaningful. Text means the literature becomes meaningful. A novel becomes meaningful. Let's say a poem becomes meaningful to you. So all these three things, they are interrelated to each other, and all these three things are responsible for this textual form that is known as literature. Now we need to think of like how this text is woven. As you have seen, one of the meaning of text is woven, that is from the Latin verb texture, and we will see how this particular text is basically woven. Uh, Now this is a poetry. This is a line from a poem by Shakespeare sonnet. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. These two lines, these are two initial lines of Shakespearean sonnet, and for engineering students, uh, I would like to inform that sonnet is basically a 14-line poem, and these are the initial two lines. Now there is a relationship. One is the syntagmatic relationship, and one is this paradigmatic relationship. These relationships uh, were posited by Ferdinand de Saussure, who is also known as the father of modern linguistics. Now I will tell you briefly what is this syntagmatic relationship and what is this paradigmatic relationship. Here you can see that there is a combination of words, like shall comes initially because it is a question. So shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So there is a combination, but at the same time there is co-occurrence restriction. And what is co-occurrence restriction? That is like there is an order that I follow if I want to raise a question. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? I can't just put this letter A after summer, and or like I will say like shall compare I to the summer's day. So this is not possible because of co-occurrence restriction. So both these things, when we take care of combination as well as the co-occurrence restriction, that is basically known as the syntagmatic relationship. But at the same time, you have a choice like thou art more lovely and more temperate. Now, what is the choice? You can change this word lovely with beautiful. You can say thou art more lovely and more temperate. Or you can change this word temperate with calm. You can say thou art more beautiful and more calm. Or similarly, in the previous line, you can say, shall I compare thee to a spring morning? You can change summer with spring, you can change day with morning. So this type of relationship, substitution, substituting one word with another, that is known as paradigmatic relationship. So when a text is woven, then the writer, whosoever is the writer takes care of syntagmatic relationship as well as paradigmatic relationship. Because when you look at a text, then has text occurs on x-axis and text also occurs on y-axis, and each word has a relationship with the other word. So this is how this text is basically formed. So in a piece of paper, on a page, when you find a text, and let's say in the text there are 100 words, so it's not possible that you can remove any 5 word at random and say like now it is also a text. No, then it will be not that meaningful when you remove those words from the page. So a writer keeps these things in a mind, that syntagmatic relationship and the paradigmatic relationship. In Saussurean terminology, as I said, like Saussure is the father of modern linguistics, these are basically semantic relationships. Semantic means meaning. So these relationships are responsible for meaningfulness of the text. So this I have discussed in more detail, that what is these semantic relationships. Here, these are two axes. So you are very much aware of x-axis and y-axis, and because axis is plural, so this is the plural spelling of axis, and semantic is something that is related to meaning. Now, these syntagmatic relationship and paradigmatic relationship, they occur at various level. For example, first we will see how they occur at sound level. Now, as you can see, there are three words: cat, sat, and mat. Now, there is only one difference. The difference is of the initial sound. If you change the initial sound, then the meaning is changed. So cat is cat because of the k sound. Sat is sat because of the s sound. If I interchange them, then cat becomes sat and sat becomes cat. Similar is the case with mat. So this is basically the contrast and substitution. These two sounds, they occur in contrast and they substitute each other. They can substitute each other. And this type of relationship is known as paradigmatic relationship at sound level. Fine. Similarly, at stylistic level, stylistic is related to study the styles of literature. For example, if I say the sun is shining bright, this is a lovely sight. When I say like this, then you can see that the word ending bright is uh, um, is in paradigmatic relationship with the sight. So bright and sight, they are in paradigmatic relationship with each other. So they are end rhyming, and this is again an example of paradigmatic relationship. Now, this syntagmatic relationship, as you can see, as I have already discussed, but here the cat sat on the mat, and as you can see, the cat, we can't say cat the. So this is like co-occurrence restriction we have. So we have this combination of subject, verb, and this preposition phrase on the mat. But at the same time, the cat can be replaced by the dog, the cow, fine, the man. So this replacement, this substitution, This is an example of paradigmatic relationship. So I can say the dog sat on the couch. Fine, the cat sat on the couch. This is basically, this is like the relationship on the vertical axis, that is basically paradigmatic relationship, and the relationship on the horizontal axis, this is basically syntagmatic relationship. So these two relationships are responsible for how the text is woven. At the same time, because we have seen this syntagmatic and paradigmatic relationship, it is also interesting to understand this concept of sign given by Ferdinand de Saussure. Now, what is a sign according to Saussure? Sign is any morphological unit or a higher unit than the morphological unit. Now, what is a morphological unit? When I say walk, walk is one morpheme word. When I say walked, then it is two morpheme word, walk and ed. So you have like ed is also a morphological unit and walk is also a morphological unit. But you know that walk has a meaning, independent meaning, but ed is associated with verb. That means ed has no independent meaning. It is meaningful when it is attached to walked or any other verb like this. But once you attach ed, then you know, like, it tells you about the past tense. So when I say I walked, then you know, okay, I'm talking about not the present time, but I'm talking about the past time. So these two, walk and ed, both are basically signs because both are conveying you some meaning. And Saussure says like everything depends upon the relations. Now, in real life also, like relationship and relations are very important. When we are low, let's say, then we go to our family and we feel rejuvenated, we feel happy. So similarly, Saussure says about this language, that in language everything is meaningful when it is relational. So one sign gets its meaning when it occurs in opposition to other sign, as we have seen, like cat is cat because cat is not sat. Fine, sat is sat because sat is not mad. So because like sir, it is like starting with sir and not with ma, that's why it becomes meaningful like this. So entire thing in this language occurs in the binary opposition, as Saussure says. And there is a dichotomy between linguistic units. So this is basically science. So like when I say walked, then walk, one morpheme is in interaction with ed and they interact and then it becomes meaningful. This is basically Saussure wants to say when Saussure says that everything depends upon relation. But at the same time, you need to understand that a sign is inherently constituted by these two elements, signifier and signified. Now, signifier and signified, you can understand uh, like two sides of a piece of paper. So if I say how you can define a piece of paper, then the first thing you will say that the paper has two sides. Fine. So similarly, a sign is a sign because it has a signifier thing and it has a signified thing, and these two elements are inherently there in a sign. Now, what is this signifier and signified thing? uh, Signifier you can consider as a sound pattern, and signified is a concept. For example, if I say dog, so dog, you hear the sound dog, it is signifier, but the concept of dog comes into your mind. So it can be any type of dog. It can be a Pomeranian, fine. It can be a bulldog. It can be sushi or any type of dog that comes that might come into your mind. But that image of dog is your signified. So there is a possibility that when I say dog and you start thinking about a cruel person, so that is also a possibility because dog then becomes the metaphor. So a same signifier can have more than one signified. Fine. So signifier remains same, but you can have more than one signified. And this thing is very much in play in literature. So you have one signifier, but you have multiple layers of meaning. So when you say how you can differentiate, let's say Chetan Bhagat from Shakespeare, In a writer like Shakespeare, in a writer like Milton, in a writer like Virginia Woolf, or in a writer like Jane Austen, meaning is never exhausted. When I say meaning is never exhausted, that means every time you read, every time you find some new meaning. But when you read a writer like Chetan Bhagat, then meaning is exhausted. So Half Girlfriend you can read in 6 hours, and you won't want to keep a copy of that book. You will pass it on to someone. Okay, now you read. But when you have a Shakespeare's Romeo or Juliet, or you have a Shakespeare's, let's say, Merchant of Venice or Hamlet, you keep a copy with you throughout your life, because you know it is a text, it is a classical text, it is not a pulp fiction. So this is basically the difference between a pulp fiction, a newspaper. You can't keep newspaper. You know, like after reading it, it is a waste paper. It is now not a newspaper at all. Why? Because once you read, the meaning is exhausted. There is no new meaning in that. And but in a classical text, like as I mentioned, the meaning is never exhausted. Every time you read, you find out, you discover new meanings. And why is it so? Because the signifier that you have in the classical text has multiple layers of signifiers in that. So these two concepts are important. Now, this is again how text is constituted. The minimal unit is phoneme. And let's say I have taken one example of phoneme, and phoneme is like the minimal sound unit of human language. Now, boy is a sound unit. So you with this sound unit, you can make a word like bat and bat and bats. So it becomes plural. So there are two morphemes. Then bats is also a word. Then you attach, let's say, a determiner, the bats, it becomes a phrase. Then you can make it a clause: while it is provided the bats harbor viruses, fine. So you have a clause, and you can also make a sentence. Sentence is a complete thought, and clause is basically not the complete thought. Though in the clause you also have a subject and a predicate, but the difference between a clause and a sentence is sentence always provides complete thought, and it can have more than one subject and predicates. So it is proved that the bats harbor viruses. So this is like entire, you start from a phoneme and you make a sentence, and when you have more than one sentence, then basically it is known as discourse. So this is how text is constituted. And when you pick let's say any text, generally the text is in the form of a discourse, because you have more than one sentence there. So when you move beyond sentence, then it is a discourse, as I said. So this, like as you can see here, there are two sentences: wash and core 6 apples, put them in a bowl. Now this example I have taken from Halliday and Hassan in the book Cohesion in English, and as you can see, them refers to 6 apples. Fine. So if I ask like what is the meaning of them here, then you need to look back to the previous sentence. So this is like them is basically your anaphor here. This pronoun is an anaphor, and anaphor looks for an antecedent. That means antecedent is that element that provides its meaning to anaphor. So 6 apples is basically providing its meaning to them here. So this is like wash and core 6 apple, put them in a bowl. Now this is a cohesive relation you have. Like if 6 apples is not here, then them is not at all meaningful. And what type of like the cohesive relation you have? This cohesive relation is across sentence boundary. Like so you have like two sentences, and in order to get its meaning, one sentence needs to cross its boundary and look at the previous sentence. At the same time, you can find like this is a subjectless sentence that you have, but still you understand it is in the form of an imperative. Someone is saying like wash and core 6 apple, like someone says thank you. So basically thank you is I thank you, but you won't use I, because I is understood there. So thank you is in the form of this imperative. Similarly, wash and core, basically the person is saying you wash and core 6 apple, but you is omitted, and it is like subject. It's like subjectless. Now we'll move to define what is text in a formal fashion. So as we have seen, like the text This word has been derived from Latin texture, and the meaning of this Latin texture is to weave, and it suggests something that is coherent. To weave is like you have various knots, various like threads. They are interrelated to each other. Fine, then you can have something a coherent text. And it is integrated collection of sentence. So what is the definition here? If we look at the etymology says like a text must be coherent and it must be integrated collection of sentences. But is it so? Is it the case? We will look at that. Is it the case? Now look at this example. Now this is the first thing. Tolstoy, War and Peace. Road sign, stop. Then colorless green ideas sleep furiously or visiting relatives are annoying. Now what do you think about these sentences like War and Peace? Let's say first. Then second is stop. And the third one is colorless green ideas sleep furiously. So someone greets you good morning and your answer is War and Peace. So again, like the person will say like, what is this? Like I'm greeting you good morning and you are answering War and Peace. I'm like, so it's not like meaningful. Even if I say like, can you name any Tolstoy work? You say War and Peace, then it is meaningful. Fine. Similarly with road sign, like when you are like on the road, when you are driving and then stop is there, then it is fine. You know like what is stop and what its meaning. Similarly, like Chomsky gives this example, colorless green ideas sleep furiously. And you can see that this sentence is basically grammatical. But if green is a color, then how can green become colorless? And even if you have ideas, then you can't have colorful ideas like green. And even if you sleep, then you can sleep peacefully, you can sleep calmly, but you can't sleep furiously. So again, though it is grammatical, but again, it is not meaningful. So but if I'm teaching linguistics and if I'm teaching grammaticality and acceptability, then this sentence is very much meaningful. So anything that occurs is not a text. Context is important to determine something is a text or not. Like as I said, like the answer of good morning cannot be War and Peace. And now we will see like how a text, but these are uh, uh, these are text in a way that context is not correct, but if the context is correct, but still they are text. Now we will see like how text becomes a discourse, because if we take that definition that something that is written or spoken is a text, then these three examples they basically qualify that definition, that okay, because they are in the written form or they are in the spoken form, so they are a text. But how text becomes or how text transforms into discourse, that you need to understand. The basic thing is knowable context. As I said, that good morning, the answer of good morning cannot be War and Peace. Fine. So similarly, the knowable context is important to realize what is a text. So this is like when there is a knowable context, then text transforms into a discourse. And as Mikhail Bakhtin, another literary philosopher, he says that discourse is basically concrete living totality. That means there is a possibility that you have given your book, let's say War and Peace, to one of your friend, and like a couple of times you have reminded your friend to return that book, and the friend is meeting you and friend is greeting you good morning. Instead of replying to good morning, you simply say War and Peace. So that can be concrete living totality. That means like you have taken into account all the things that happened between you and your friend in the past, and then you replied. So you replied, okay, greet me good morning afterward, but first return my book. Then that is like knowable context is important to transform text into discourse. This is very important thing that you need to keep in mind. Now, can a text be like decontextualized? Now, what is decontextualized? This is very popular among engineering student or among general public. This The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Now, the first sentence of this of this text is the boy's name was Santiago. Now, this is the first sentence. Now, what I have done, I have just extracted this one sentence from the text and pasted it here or typed it here. This process, this process is basically known as decontextualized. So, for example, when you quote some author, when you quote, let's say, some scientist, when you quote someone, then this that type of thing is basically decontextualized. That means like you are picking one extract from the text, from the text, and you are using it for your purpose here. So here, like, just in order to show like what is decontextualized, like I have picked that first line from The Alchemist and I have pasted and typed it here, this skill. So that means like text can be decontextualized. Fine. Now, this is one famous uh, again this famous example from Stanley Fish, and there is an anecdote, there is one live example when between a conversation, um, Stanley Fish and his student. So what happens actually, once a student comes to Stanley Fish, he was a professor and tutor, and that student asked, "Is there a text in the class?" So it's like general thing, like new students generally they go to the teacher and they ask like, okay, tell me the text. And the meaning of text generally is the reading material. Okay, which book I should prefer, which book I should read. So Stanley Fish understood the same thing. Like, is there a text in this class? That means like the student is asking for the reading material. But basically the student was not asking for the reading material, but student was asking for, is there some theoretical viewpoint in this class? Because you are teaching us. So are you taking a theoretical viewpoint, some position, some standpoint while discussing the particular concept that you are discussing in the class? So that means like a one word, like one signifier text has many signifiers that we have. And when you have a signifier that has many signifiers, that means that particular signifier is open to many interpretations. But not all interpretations are valid. For example, there is uh, there is there is a poem by William Black, and it says like, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. Now, if you say like, this tiger, tiger burning bright is a digestion problem. If you say like someone has consumed the meat of tiger, and because of that consumption, the person's stomach is burning, then that type of interpretation is not valid. That means certain interpretations, we agree that a signifier is open, has many signifiers, and a signifier is open to many interpretations, but each interpretation is not valid. Then what is valid? Then like who will take care of this validity of a text? That means like, who will take care of like, this is a mouse, like let's say, so who will take care of that this is a mouse? So I cannot decide like, look, this is let's say a cat, and I say like, okay, now onward I will say it cat. You will say like, it's your choice, but it won't change the definition of this tool. It will remain a mouse. That means there are certain people, they determine the definition of a text or an object. So you can't, on your whims and fancies, change the definition of a particular text. And Stanley Fish talks about interpretive communities. So here, interpretive communities, they have a role. That means, again, interpretive communities, it's again an abstract thing. For example, when we say like Shakespeare's work is a classical work, it is decided by interpretive communities. So it's not like something like it's like a law, a natural law, and somewhere written in the book that okay, Shakespeare's work is a classical work. It's not the case. So it is decided by interpretive communities. Similarly, many interpretations that are there of a work, and that interpretation, if those interpretations are valid, then it depends upon the readers who agree on certain meanings. So again, Fish says that the meanings are already conditioned by the situation in which it was uttered. So again, this situation thing, as I said, that text becomes discourse. So knowable context transform text into discourse. So similar thing is like when something occurs, then it is already conditioned, conditioned by its surroundings. Surroundings, that means the surrounding words. Then again, when we look at from the Saussurean point of view, then again, like everything depends upon relation. So that means like the meaning of a word depends upon the nearby words. So generally our parents, like your parents, they they might be saying this thing to you, that choose your friends very carefully. So again, because your company is important to ascertain, to determine what you are. And the same idea stated by Stanley Fish is also echoed in Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein is again a language philosopher, and his most famous work is Philosophical Investigation. And at one place he says the meaning of a word is its use in the language. That means again, me the independent word with its meaning has no meaning at all. That means like once the word interacts with other words, once the word is used in a meaningful context, in the usage, then it becomes meaningful. And because of that particular reason, when someone wants to enhance one's vocabulary, English teachers generally they say that you should learn that particular word in a context. Don't learn the meaning of a word in isolation, because the meaning of a word is dependent upon its use in the language, and then it will also be there in your memory. If you simply learn a word and its meaning, then after some time you will forget. But when you start using it in your day-to-day vocabulary, in your day-to-day let's say usages, then it will always remain in your mind. So this is one thing. And the second thing is, what protects us against the indeterminacy of signifiers. So basically, we know that one signifier can have many signified. For example, if I say I'm going to the bank in the daytime, then the meaning is, let's say, okay, you are going to a financial bank, a financial institution. But let's say if I say in the night, let's say 9 o'clock, okay, I'm going to the bank, and there is a meaning like, because bank is not open in the night, and the meaning is like, okay, you are going to a river bank, not the financial institution. So, like this context is again important, but again, the question is what protects us against the indeterminacy of signifiers. So, what promises us the ability to have common meaning is that there is always a contextual setting, and the sign of its presence is precisely the absence of any reference to it. So, this is basically that when a sign occurs, when you have a signifier, you also have a contextual setting. That contextual setting creates a presence for that particular signs, and absence for any other type of reference. As I said, like bank is financial bank when you use the bank in the daytime, and the same word you use in the night. And if you are living near the river, then the meaning is like you are going to river bank. So this is like the reference at one time creates the presence, and at the other time presence creates the absence. So we can say very comfortably that context precedes sentence. So whenever we utter any sentence, context is already there. Context, that is like even if we utter a very novel sentence, let's say if I say yesterday I met a dinosaur in my parking. Now, I hope that this type of sentence you have never heard of in your life. That I have, like, I met a dinosaur in my parking. So it's like a novel sentence. Then you will say like it's a novel sentence. First time I'm hearing this sentence, and you said like context precedes sentence. There is no context as such. Context is very much there. What context is very much there? You know what is the parking, that is first thing. You know when I say I, then what is the meaning of I, that is very much there. You know the act of meeting when I say I met. So these things are known. What is the new thing like dinosaur? So you will say like I met a dinosaur in the parking. Then you will say like how can anyone can meet a dinosaur? Then it will be like a model of dinosaur or any other thing, a toy dinosaur, fine. Or like dinosaur is a metaphor a person, like I refer to like okay I met a dinosaur. So like these are knowable contexts, and these knowable contexts they are responsible for transforming text into discourse. So what it is like we will fall back to context in which we are accustomed to hear such utterances. So there is a possibility like all these things like dinosaur can be a toy, dinosaur can be a model, dinosaur can be a person, fine. So all these things are there. So a decontextualized text does not mean anything but matching to context. So the bottom line is understanding requires situational competence. So it's not like learning vocabulary is more important or fine, but the situation, the like whether you have situational competence or not, whether you are able to make multiple meanings of a text that is there or not. So that is situational competence is more important, because if there is a situational competence, then even if I I uttered this sentence like colorless green ideas sleep furiously, then if you have a rich situational competence, then you can think of okay like he is thinking of some poetic line or some he is thinking in some philosophical direction. So you can like you can guess different types of meaning because you have situational competence. So, what is the difference between language competence or lingual competence? Lingual competence is basically narrow. Why it is narrow? Because you have few lakhs words in a dictionary, fine, and one word has let's say two meaning, four meaning. You have a word like set in English, and that has like 150 meanings. That is the maximum that you have in English. So, but still lingual competence is narrow, fine. Sometimes it happens like when you read a text and you do not know the meaning of the word, but still you try to look at the edges. You look into the margin and you try to find out okay what would be the possible meaning of that particular word. And this looking to margin looking at edges is known as situational competence. You are just trying to find out what is the situation, why this word actually occurred. So when you compare these two, lingual competence with the situational competence, then you find that lingual competence is basically narrow and situational competence is very broad. At the same time, words themselves do not determine the meaning, that you need to understand. And Saussure, in his course in general linguistics, very clearly stated this thing that a sign has no inherent value as such. That means the meaning of a word is determined by its company, by other words. Fine. So, what is other words? Sometimes other words become the context or the discourse in which they take part. Now this is a bit broad, and engineering students they are not aware of like Derrida, Bloom, or Fish, but still like I will try to tell you. When you read the work of Derrida, Bloom, or even Stanley Fish, you find like their words or their works are difficult. And why it is difficult? Because these writers, Derrida, Bloom, and Stanley Fish, generally they try to impose their own meanings on the on the readers. So again, in a way, they are violating. violating this one thing that Stanley Fish himself said, that meaning is determined by interpretive communities. He said like it is interpretive communities rather than either the text or reader that produce meanings. But when you read these theoretical works, their theoretical work, then you find it difficult. And there is one one critic, literary critic, M.H. Abrams, and he says like generally in the work literal or normative meaning is overruled by stubborn interpreters who impose their own meaning. So these three are basically stubborn interpreters. That means like they imposed their meaning on the readers. So the general meaning, once you read their sentence and when you try to find out, okay, this is the meaning of this sentence, then basically that is not the meaning. Meaning is something else. When you read the work of Derrida and the Bloom. So this is one thing you need to understand. Like, but in general, interpretive communities they are responsible to find out the meaning. And when you read the work of Derrida, then obviously there are many people who read his work or Bloom's work. So they again make an interpretive community, and that particular interpretive community is responsible uh, for the meaning. For example, Derrida at one place says sign is a sign of another sign. Now, if you think of like sign is a sign of another sign, what does it mean? Sign, sign, sign. Three places you are using sign is a sign of another sign. What does it mean? But when you think of that language is spoken and writing secondary, as Sasur said, like language is primary and writing secondary, then you can think of, okay, writing sign is basically, writing sign signifies the spoken sign. So you can say sign is a sign of another sign. So in that way you can say that that first we speak and then we write that thing. So like written words basically they signify our spoken word. So that type of thing is there. And when someone writes like this, sign is a sign of another sign, in that manner, basically these type of writing is like stubborn interpreters. They try to impose their new meanings on the readers that we have now. Those engineering students who do not know how to do a textual analysis, then then this small prayer will be helpful to find out like how meaningfulness is inside the text. So this is a short poem. And Almighty God, our heavenly Father, who of thy tender mercy didst give thine only Son Jesus Christ to suffer death upon the cross for our redemption. Now, this is a liturgical prayer. Liturgical prayer, it is used in church service, as you can understand, because Jesus Christ is there. This redemption word is used, and the variety is religious English. This type of. But if I say like, okay, what is there in this poem? Then you can say God gives His only Son Jesus to save human beings, and He died for us, and this is all. That means like the meaning that is there. But once you know the nitty gritty of the text, then you can enrich your analysis, uh, and you can refine it. So what is this nitty gritty? You can find out that, okay, Almighty God, what is this? Almighty God is an example of vocative case. Then who? Almighty God and who? Then it is like vocative case plus relative that you have. Then you can see, okay, this word father with capital F and this son with capital S. That means they are not talking about father and son relationship as I have with my father, as you have with your father. That is not the biological relationship we are talking about, because if we talk about that biological relationship, then we'll use small letter f, small letter s. But here what we have done, we have used father and son as caps lock, with the caps lock capital. So here it means like they are not talking about biological relationship. Then what they are talking about? They are talking about heavenly relationship. Similarly, you find like thy and thine. So it's an archaic English they have used. Suffer, death, cross, redemption. They are collocations, like they are associated with each other. Fine. So certain words they are associated with other words in some way or the other. That particular thing is basically known as collocation that you have. and then dits you have, then dits is again an example of archaic English. So you have this all this knowledge like thy tender mercy, then you can say like who of thy tender mercy. Generally you do not use your English like this, you say tender mercy of whom, like you say in regular English, tender mercy of whom or your tender mercy, but you won't use who of thy tender mercy. Then this word order is again like inverse, like uh, you have topicalized this relative pronoun because you want to give importance to who, and who is a replacement or substitution of Almighty God. And again Almighty God and who, they are coming in this paradigmatic relationship of substitution that we have seen. So once you have all these knowledge, then your interpretation won't be like this one sentence. Then your interpretation will be like this. The text begins with a vocative expression that directly addresses God, by which the connection between the addressee and address is well established. Fine, because you are saying oh God, Almighty God, so you are just directly making a connection with the God. Also the inversion of syntax topicalizes, so you are topicalizing this, like you are changing the regular then archaic use of words that you have. Then you have capitalization, it is also known as semantics as capitonym, like father and son you have. Then use of thy, thine, and these collocation words. So this is how you can analyze a text once you have more textual information. And that textual information, that textual like let's say relatedness is provided by once you have the knowledge of linguistics, once you have a lens to find out what is there below the surface level. So all those things like that we have discussed, this vocative case, these things are actually happening below the surface level. At the surface level it is like very primary thing that God gives his son to save human beings and he died for us. So this is how things are related, and there are certain things like intertextuality, intersubjectivity. They are also related to textuality that we have, and like intertextuality is basically a term given by Julia Kristeva, and intersubjectivity is also the term that is coined by Julia Kristeva, again a literary critic. And this intertextuality basically replaces intersubjectivity. Fine. So inter as you know, like inter means between, and textuality between text, something that is happening between text is intertextuality, and something that is happening between subject is intersubjectivity. So when I say intertextuality replaces intersubjectivity, that is again the role of interpretive communities comes into play. So it's not like a writer, like the author is dead, as Ronald Bass says, the author is dead, and the meaningfulness is associated with the reader. So if meaningfulness is associated with the reader, then tiger tiger burning bright will be a consumption problem. Consumption in like I have consumed the meat of tiger and now I have this digestion problem. But that interpretation is not valid. So basically, intertextuality replaces intersubjectivity, and the meaning is not transferred directly from writer to reader, but instead is meditated through or filtered by codes imparted to the writer and reader by other text. So this is always a better thing, that intertextuality, like once you do not know the meaning, and if once you try to find out what does it mean, like when a critique says like sign is a sign of another sign, then basically you look at first the definition of sign. So you go to Saussure, you find out okay what is sign, and then you will know like sign is a sign of another sign. That means writing sign signifies spoken sign. That is the meaning of sign is a sign of another sign. So that type of thing, intertextuality is always a better replacement than intersubjectivity, because your intersubjectivity might go wrong and give you wrong meaning. Then you have this intertextuality and hypertextuality. This hypertext is a text, generally text on your system, which alludes derived from related or earlier work of hypertext. So the computer display or electric devices generally, they created hypertextuality. For example, if you read, let's say, let's say India Today magazine on Maxter. Maxter is a application and platform. Then what? Once you click at India Today, then there is a 10-second video. So that 10-second video is again imposed hypertextuality, because if whether you want it to have that video or not, but compulsorily they will play, then they will open the India Today magazine. So that is an example of imposed hypertextuality that you find. And this meta text that we have already discussed, that meta text is the writing that reflects on writing, and linguistics is an example of meta text. And there is one thing again said by Jacques Derrida, that nothing outside the text. Now, many people, they understand it as as an example of that everything is in the text. Now, this is not the meaning of nothing outside the text. What Derrida means, that textuality means that reference is not to external reality. That means something that is in the text cannot be find out outside the text. That means like there is no outside reality that can ascertain the meaning of something that is there in the text. So this is again related to intertextuality. That means like again it is curbing intersubjectivity. It's not like your own whims and fancies, and your own whims and fancies are responsible to determining the meaning of the text. It is either the text or intertext, like between other texts, then the meaning is certain. It is not simply by your interpretation or your blind faith, or like whatever your whims and fancies are. So this is the end of this presentation, and we have discussed various things that are related to text, textuality, um, and discourse. And we have seen like how text transforms into discourse, and other things that we have discussed. So this is we have discussed, and now we will come to some question and answer session, and like if any one of you have any question, then please write in the message in the live chat, and then I'll be able to answer that question. Any one of you has any question, any feedback, please write in the live chat. And I'm just looking at the live chat right now, and you just put the question Q question mark, and you write it a question, any query, anything that you want to ask. I will try. I will try to answer that. So. So like Linde Zapra is asking like, may I ask for a copy of your presentation? So I request the organizers to provide the link to different participants, or share the link in the chat where they can have this copy, so they can be referred to it later on. Then we have Kirthana, thank you for organizing team and for valuable and fruitful session saying. Then so I'm more interested in your question. Discourse interpretation, very sentence usefully executed, sir. Thilgavati is saying this thing. Then Rupam Gogoi is saying very beautiful presentation. Preetham, very informative. Yogita Mandik, very nicely presented. Amudha Madhavan, kindly share the PPT, sir. Okay, I request the organizer to please share these things with the participants, so they will be like Raj Deshmukh is saying like very helpful session. Then any question, please raise your question, so I'll be happy to answer. Please give the difference between intertextuality and intersubjectivity. Sarita Bharadwaj is saying. I'm just again saying that intertextuality is between text. Between text means like it can be text from the present time, it can be text from, let's say, 10th century. So any text that I refer to find out the meaning, that is basically intertextuality. And intersubjectivity is like between subjects, like writer is a subject and reader is a subject. So finding out the meaning is not one-to-one relationship between. So what the writer has said, the writer's mind is in the text, and I am using my mind to find out the meaning. That is not the correct way to go for the meaningfulness. Intersubjectivity can never lead you, like sometimes it can lead you, but it is not the correct way to find out the meaningfulness of the text. The correct way is to intertextuality. That is basically the difference between inter means between, subjective like something that is related to individual, that is subjective, and text, any text that can. So, how we interpret text from context? You cannot interpret text from context, but context is responsible. This question is asked by Professor T. Ajit. Basically, you can't interpret text from context. Text gets its meaning in context. Context is responsible for getting text a meaning, but the validity of the meaning depends upon knowable context. As I said, like tiger burning bright can be a digestion problem for someone if you simply looking at the text and context. But if it is knowable context, then text becomes discourse. This is basically the meaning. Uh, then, Malti Jairaj is asking, may I know the difference between the ideas of Ronald Barthes, structuralism and post-structuralism? Uh, though this is not the part of this session, but it's still structuralism and post-structuralism. You can think of like something that is related to the form of the language. That is like uh, whatever you find out, you are more concerned about the form of that particular language. But in the post-structuralism, you move out from the form. Fine. Once you move out from the form and you take into account other disciplines as well, other things as well, then it is basically uh, the moving out from structuralism to and going beyond the post-structuralism. This I can say in brief right now. And then any other question, like elaborate on decontextualization. Pure Soul is saying decontextualizing basically is like you are extracting the text, extracting some portion from the text and using it in your context. You are using like either in a form of a quote, in a form of a saying. Fine. So it so happens like when it is Independence Day or Republic Day, generally people quote Abraham Lincoln, government by the people for the people. So this is again an example of decontextualization. Someone asked like anaphora and cataphora, Swada Bhartiya saying what is the difference? Anaphora is like looking backward, cataphora is looking forward. Fine. So this is basically the difference. So when we have discussed like six apples and them, then it is an example of this anaphora thing. Cataphora is like if it is coming forward, then it will become the cataphora thing. Anyone saying Arun Sharma is asking research topic you would recommend based on today's lecture? Okay, we will discuss it afterwards. So explain discourse analysis. So basically, what is a discourse? Anything that is written or spoken and used in the communication, that is basically the discourse definition of discourse. And once you do the analysis of that spoken part, written part used in communication, that is the part of discourse analysis. You have various tools to use discourse analysis. This is I can say here right now. Megha Mishra is saying it's an enlightening experience, very informative. Jyoti Gupta is saying, and Linde Zapra watching from Philippines, she is just showing the sign of Namaste here. And Megha Gujarati saying extremely nice presentation. Any other question that we have? Discourse analysis like Abhishek Mistry is asking. I have already uh, discussed. Can you explain signifier and signified? Yeah, you can understand the signifier is the material form, spoken form or written form can be a signifier, and signified is basically the concept. So tree, T-R-E, the three sound like I am using T-R-E, but these are like signifiers. And the signified is actually the some image of a tree that you have. So like one is the concept, another one is the spoken form that you have, and both these things spoken and they are in your mind. So this concept and sound pattern both are actually there in your mind that we have. And these are the things. Someone is like Kamlesh Dangwal is saying, where is the feedback form? So please, organizer, provide them the feedback form. The discourse analysis I have sent. Any other one last question I can take? Fine. Okay. So I end this session. I respect time, and I think this time is up. So I end this session. Thank you all. Namaste.